Mary always loved quiet holidays the most, not because they were extravagant, not because anyone spent a lot of money, but because, at my age, you start realizing love is usually hidden inside small things. A phone call, a handwritten card, someone remembering how you take your coffee. That's what mattered to me. And this past Mother's Day, I truly believe my son still remembered me that way. I'm Mary. I'm 63 years old, widowed for almost 9 years now, and my son Daniel has been my whole world for most of my life. When his father passed, it was just the two of us for a long time. I worked double shifts at a dental office during the day and cleaned offices at night just so he could play baseball and go on school trips without feeling different from the other boys, and I never regretted it. Not once, even now. That's the difficult thing about motherhood. Even when your heart is bruised, it still protects the people who hurt it. Mother's Day that year fell on a warm Sunday morning. I remember waking up early and opening my kitchen window while the coffee brewed beside me. The air smelled like fresh grass and rain from the night before. Quiet, peaceful. I smiled to myself because Daniel had called 2 days earlier sounding unusually cheerful. "We've got something planned for you, Mom," he'd said. Something planned. Those words stayed with me all weekend. I didn't expect jewelry or flowers or anything expensive. Truthfully, I would have been happy with breakfast together, maybe a few hours sitting on their patio listening to my granddaughter talk about school. That's all mothers really want after a certain age, to still feel included, to still feel remembered. Around noon, I drove to Daniel's house carrying a blueberry pie I'd baked that morning. Emily opened the door, distracted, holding her phone between her shoulder and ear while speaking to someone about airport luggage restrictions. At the time, I didn't think much of it. People are busy. Life moves fast. I told myself not to be sensitive. Daniel hugged me quickly before disappearing back into the kitchen where he seemed stressed about something on his laptop. There was movement everywhere. Suitcases near the hallway, printed papers on the counter, Emily rushing upstairs. I remember standing there holding my pie dish thinking, maybe they're planning a summer trip. Then I heard Emily laugh from the staircase. "Oh my God, my mom is going to cry when she sees the hotel." I froze. Something about the sentence made me pay attention. Daniel walked back into the room carrying a small white envelope. Thin. So thin. He smiled quickly and handed it to me. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom." I looked at the envelope, then at him, and for a second, I waited. Maybe there was more coming. Maybe this was just part of something else. I opened it carefully. Inside was a birthday-style card with $15 tucked into it. 110, 15. That was it. I remember staring at those bills longer than I should have, not because of the amount, but because of how carelessly it all felt, like someone tipping a waitress after a rushed lunch. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "Sorry it's small this year, Mom. Things have just been expensive lately." Expensive. I nodded slowly. Then Emily came downstairs, smiling brightly, and said the words that changed something inside me forever. "We finally booked Mom's Paris trip. First class, too." Paris. For her mother. First class. I actually thought I misheard her. I looked up slowly and saw the excitement all over their faces. The printed itineraries, the hotel confirmations, the champagne-colored luggage near the wall, and suddenly every little thing in that room became painfully clear. Thousands of dollars. For her. $15. For me. I felt my chest tighten, but I kept smiling because mothers learn how to survive disappointment quietly, especially in front of their children. "Oh, wow," I whispered. "Paris." Emily laughed. "She deserves it after everything she's done for us." The words hit harder than I think she intended. After everything she's done for us, and I just sat there thinking. Did my sacrifices become invisible somehow? Had the years blurred together so completely that my son no longer remembered who stayed awake beside hospital beds when he had pneumonia, who skipped meals so he could have new sneakers, who emptied her savings account to help pay for his college textbooks after his father died. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But even then, even sitting there with $15 folded inside a greeting card while they talked excitedly about Parisian cafes and river cruises, part of me still tried to excuse it. Maybe they were struggling financially. Maybe Emily's mother paid for part of it. Maybe I was overreacting. Mothers do that. We shrink our pain until it barely has a voice. The rest of the afternoon felt blurry. I smiled at the right moments, complimented the trip, cut slices of pie nobody really ate, and every now and then I caught myself touching the envelope in my purse like I needed to confirm it was real. $15. By the time I drove home that evening, the sun was beginning to set. Orange light spilled across the dashboard while the silence inside my car pressed against me. And for the first time in my life, I asked myself a question I had spent years avoiding. When exactly did I stop being important in my own son's life? I didn't know the answer yet, but deep down, I think that was the day something inside me quietly began to break. The strange thing about heartbreak at my age is that it rarely arrives all at once. It comes quietly, piece by piece, like little drops of water slowly cracking stone. After Mother's Day, I tried to convince myself I was being emotional, too sensitive, too dramatic. I kept replaying Daniel's words in my head. "Things have just been expensive lately, Mom." And every time I remembered them, I forced myself to nod like it made sense. Because mothers are trained to explain away disappointment, especially when it comes from our children. But once your eyes open to something, you start seeing it everywhere. A few days after Mother's Day, I was sitting alone in my living room folding laundry when my phone buzzed. For a second, my heart lifted. Daniel. But when I answered, he barely said hello. "Hey, Mom, quick question. Could you pick Lily up from school tomorrow? Emily's mom usually does Thursdays, but she's busy getting ready for the Paris trip." Emily's mom usually does Thursdays. I don't know why that sentence stayed with me. Maybe because I suddenly realized how often I heard about her dinners, her vacations, her birthday celebrations, her opinions. Meanwhile, entire weeks would pass without anyone asking how I was doing. Still, I said yes. Of course I did. Because even when your heart hurts, love doesn't switch off like a light. The next afternoon, I picked up my granddaughter and took her for ice cream before bringing her home. And when we walked into the house, Emily smiled warmly at Lily before barely glancing at me. "Perfect timing," she said. "Mom's coming over for dinner in an hour." I stood there holding my purse, waiting for the invitation that never came. No, stay and eat with us. No, we'd love for you to join. Just silence. I smiled anyway. Well, I should get going. Daniel looked up from his phone for half a second. "Okay, Mom, thanks again." That was it. I drove home with an ache in my chest I couldn't explain out loud, because none of it sounded terrible when spoken individually. That's the confusing part. There was no screaming, no cruelty, no dramatic betrayal anyone could point at and say, "There." That's the moment everything changed. It was smaller than that, colder, like slowly disappearing from your own family without anyone noticing. And once I started paying attention, I realized it had been happening for years. Birthdays where my gift felt like an afterthought. Phone calls returned 3 days later with rushed apologies. Holidays rearranged around Emily's family while I quietly adjusted my schedule to fit whatever time remained. I remembered one Christmas Eve sitting alone beside my little artificial tree, eating reheated soup, because Daniel told me they had promised Emily's mother the whole evening. "Don't worry, Mom," he'd said. "We'll stop by tomorrow morning." Tomorrow morning turned into late afternoon. Late afternoon became a 30-minute visit before they rushed off again. At the time, I told myself that's just how marriage works. Things change. Families grow. But deep down, I think I knew the truth long before Mother's Day. I just didn't want to say it out loud. One evening, I found myself staring through old photo albums spread across my dining table. Daniel missing his front teeth at age 8. Daniel holding his high school diploma. Daniel hugging me after college graduation while I cried into his shoulder because his father should have been there to see it. I traced my fingers over the photographs and thought to myself, when did I become someone he only calls when he needs help? That realization hurt more than the $15 ever could, because money isn't what breaks a mother's heart. It's feeling replaceable. One afternoon, Emily posted photos online from her mother's farewell dinner before Paris. Flowers everywhere, champagne glasses, a custom cake with Bon Voyage, Mom, written in gold frosting. Underneath the picture, Daniel commented, "Couldn't have done any of this without you. We love you so much." I stared at those words for a long time. Couldn't have done any of this without you. And suddenly, memories started flooding back. The nights I stayed awake sewing Halloween costumes because money was tight. The years I skipped buying winter coats for myself so Daniel could attend summer baseball camps. The second mortgage after his father died. I never wanted recognition for those things. That's not what motherhood is. But seeing another woman appreciated so openly while my own sacrifices faded into silence, it did something to me. I couldn't believe how invisible I had allowed myself to become. The hardest part wasn't Emily. Honestly, it wasn't. She loved her mother. There's nothing wrong with that. The pain came from my son standing beside it all without ever noticing what it was doing to me. Or maybe he noticed. Maybe he just assumed I'd keep accepting crumbs because I always had before. And the terrible thing is, he wasn't entirely wrong. For years, I made excuses for every disappointment. They're busy. They're stressed. They didn't mean it that way. I protected them from the weight of my feelings while quietly carrying those feelings alone. But something inside me had started changing after Mother's Day. Not loudly, not angrily, quietly, like a door slowly closing. One night, I sat alone on my back porch, listening to the wind move through the trees, while my untouched tea grew cold beside me. And for the first time, I stopped asking myself how to earn my son's attention. Instead, I found myself wondering something far more painful. What happens to a mother when she finally realizes love has become one-sided? There's a strange kind of grief that comes when someone you love is still alive, but no longer reaches for you the same way. That was the grief I carried. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet sadness sitting beside me in ordinary moments, washing dishes, folding towels, watching the evening news alone while the house hummed with silence. After Mother's Day and all the small realizations that followed, something inside me slowly began to change. At first I fought it. I kept thinking maybe Daniel would notice. Maybe one day he'd call and say, "Mom, I'm sorry, I haven't been there for you." But those calls never came. Instead, the phone only rang when they needed something. Could I babysit? Could I water the plants while they traveled? Could I lend a little money until next payday? And every time, I heard myself answering softly, "Of course." Even while my heart whispered, "What about me?" One Saturday morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table when Daniel called asking if I could keep Lily overnight because he and Emily had been invited to a couple's wine retreat. I stared out the window while he talked. The bird feeder outside swayed gently in the wind. Sunlight spilled across my floor, and for the first time in my life, I hesitated. Not because I didn't love my granddaughter. I adored that little girl with every piece of my heart. But suddenly, I realized something painful. Nobody ever asked whether I had plans. Nobody imagined I might have a life outside of waiting to be useful. I thought to myself, when did I become the backup plan instead of family? Daniel paused on the phone. "Mom?" I swallowed hard. "I can't this weekend." The silence that followed felt enormous. "Oh," he said finally. "Okay, I guess we'll figure something else out." No concern, no curiosity. He didn't ask why, didn't ask if I was all right, and somehow that hurt more than anger would have. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my reflection in the dark television screen. I looked tired, older than I remembered. Not because of age, because of emotional exhaustion. Years of shrinking myself so other people could stay comfortable. That afternoon, I did something small, but for me, it felt enormous. I drove to a little bookstore 20 minutes away and bought myself a novel and a lavender candle. Then I took myself to lunch, alone. At first, I felt foolish sitting there by myself near the restaurant window, but as I sipped my soup and watched strangers passing outside, something unexpected happened. I felt peaceful. I hadn't felt that in a very long time. No waiting for phone calls, no wondering whether I mattered, no trying to earn affection that should have been freely given, just quiet. And in that quiet, I realized how much of my life had revolved around being needed, especially after my husband died. Daniel became my purpose, my routine, my reason to keep moving forward. I poured so much love into motherhood that somewhere along the way, I forgot I was still a person outside of it. That realization didn't make me angry, just sad. Because mothers are rarely taught how to let go gracefully. We're taught to endure, to sacrifice, to forgive endlessly. But nobody talks about the heartbreak of becoming emotionally unnecessary to the child you once carried in your arms. Weeks passed, then months, and slowly I stopped chasing. I stopped being the first one to call, stopped rearranging my entire schedule around theirs, stopped volunteering help before they even asked. And something interesting happened. The silence grew louder. Daniel noticed eventually. One evening, he called sounding irritated. "Mom, we haven't seen you much lately." I almost laughed at the irony. We haven't seen you much lately, as if absence only mattered when it belonged to me. But I kept my voice calm. "I've been busy." There was an awkward pause. Then he said something that told me everything I needed to know. "Well, Lily misses you." "Not I miss you. Lily misses you." I closed my eyes for a moment and felt something inside me settle quietly into acceptance. Not rage, not bitterness, acceptance. Because the truth was finally undeniable. My son loved me. I believe he did. But somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me clearly, stopped seeing the woman behind the role. And maybe that happens more often than people admit. Children grow up, they build new families, new priorities, new loyalties. And sometimes, mothers keep clinging to old versions of their children long after those versions are gone. That was the hardest part to grieve. Not losing Daniel completely, losing the little boy who once reached for my hand without hesitation, the little boy who thought I hung the moon. One evening near the end of summer, I sat alone on my porch, wrapped in a light cardigan while the sky turned soft shades of pink and gold. The air smelled like cut grass and distant rain, beautiful, quiet. I held a cup of tea between my hands and realized something surprising. I was going to be okay, not because my son suddenly changed, not because anyone apologized, but because I finally stopped measuring my worth by how often other people remembered me. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Still sad sometimes, still disappointed, but free. I think that's what healing really is at this age, not forgetting the pain, just no longer building your life around it. And maybe the hardest lesson motherhood ever taught me was this. Sometimes loving your child also means letting go of the version of them you kept begging to come back.